And I must insist, boys. Let's get going a little bit.
Okay.
We have
You know something we don't know.
I'm gonna pull back the curtain to the listener. We got a long night ahead of us. Both Ryan and I are presenting.
Oh, don't build mine up
tonight. I'm not building yours up. It could totally suck, but I do know that both of us have been sitting there chuckling to ourselves, going, "Oh, this is gonna take forever."
Yeah, we've been doing that for about the past 48 hours. You're locked in here with us.
Yeah, you're trapped in here with us now.
Should I go buy more warm Coors Lights?
You should.
No, I got
absolutely.
some Raniers.
Room Raniers.
We also got Japanese whiskey, which may be where the night takes us in themes of the episodes.
Hey, where I'm going, I don't need roads.
Yeah, not at all. And I see that I see that you've picked up on the first image here. I haven't even introduced my concept in a title slide. I just wanted to promise you boys, I'm going to do a lot of talking that may or may not be incredibly boring to you. And so if I do start talking about things like manufacturing and management philosophies, and you start to internally tune out a little bit in your mind, just think, I'm going to connect two pretty distant concepts to each other in this episode.
In some grand gotcha.
Step one, the Tachanka. A Russian World War I military vehicle that is a horse-drawn carriage with a gun on the back.
It's simple, elegant,
beautiful, simple.
Two worlds collide.
It follows,
war and horses.
It follows the Lotus manufacturing principle of simplify and add lightness. To your vehicle, which if you know anything about Lotuses, that's laughable. So we're going to connect this concept here, this 1910 or beyond, 1910s war vehicle. Step 2, my presentation.
Question mark.
Step 3, we're going to get to Back to the Future, and I'm going to connect these two together, these concepts.
All right.
We're looking for the glue here.
We're looking for the red string between.
One last interruption before we move on.
Oh,
one last interruption for this slide. Have you seen the photos of Christopher Lloyd on the set of Back to the Future? He looks so young.
Oh yeah.
He looks like such a young old man.
Oh yeah.
He's probably in his early 40s, and he's I don't know.
But you throw that gray wig on him, and you give him some wild arms and.
He still looked like an old fucking man in Dennis the Menace.
Tachanka, though, it's one, brilliant, because, hey, you're going to run out of gas. Hopefully
you don't run out of ass.
You don't run out of ass, especially when they can eat all this grass.
I don't think the Russian military
was on... That's where ass, gas, and grass came from.
Yes.
I don't think the Russian military was on petroleum yet, either. At this point.
I mean, that would make sense. Well, that, and I assume you got to use it where you can use it. I also like how gun is facing back. I assume you can semi-rotate that gun a little bit.
I feel like I do see wheels here.
There are some wheels.
Like it can be cranked to the left and the right.
A little bit.
If you spook the horses, though, you are shooting away from horses. At the very least, you're primed to be facing backwards, so you aren't going to be surprised. The driver probably. Not so lucky.
A horse can't be trained so much to...
Yeah, they can. War horses exist.
That's right.
Yeah.
Horses can be trained to deal with...
They can be trained, but it's still a wild animal you're dealing with.
Totally.
Yeah. Anyway, let's get into what step 2 is here.
All right.
And my episode is titled The Toyota War.
Yay!
Let's go!
That's right, boys. We're talking technicals tonight.
We're talking about the forbidden stuff in the movie
Warhammer
cars.
40K has gotten so rad over the past couple of years.
This is Warhammer 1985-7. Is what it is. But goddamn, there's something so dope about it.
It's so elegant.
So pimped.
We got an anti-aircraft gun on the back of a Toyota Helix pickup truck.
Yeah.
Look, I just there's something I love so much about. Yes, of course. The 1970s and 1980s Toyota livery.
Hell yeah.
They're bringing it back too as well.
No shit.
Next year, 2024, is the 40th anniversary of the Toyota 4Runner. And they are bringing back the livery that is a monotoned vehicle, but with gradient colored stripes, starting in one small area of a vehicle and then broadening out. Mm-hmm. It looks so great. If my 4Runner ever makes it to 500,000 miles, I'm going to take it in for a paint job as a treat. And I'm going to do the fuck out of this with it. Because sadly, by the time my 4Runner was created in 1999, they weren't doing this dope-ass liveries anymore. But yeah.
Also, I like that Miska wrote his name on his truck, just so he doesn't lose it with everybody else with an aircraft carrier.
We'll actually talk about
that's
what
the thing, right?
what this Miska may actually represent in our next slide. So, here we have
the
technicals.
truck.
The war machine for the masses. I mean, this is the proletariat's weapon, 100%. Starting in step one, the Russian pulled horse Tachanka, and even arguably further, like with, chariots with archers.
I'm understanding this beautiful imagery that you have now.
Yeah.
This is fantastic.
These are technicals. This one in particular is actually of specific renown. This is a somewhat untraditional, shall we say, technical, because this is a Ford F-250. Not necessarily something you see a ton of in the Middle East.
You don't.
Not much.
That's a red, white, and blue car.
It is, yeah. It's an American car.
Hey, get your terrorist hands off my red, white, and blue cars.
But this one didn't start in Iraq, where I believe this picture was taken.
Okay.
This Ford F-250 originated its life in, Zach, your homeland of Texas.
No shit.
Yeah, as we can see on the side of this truck, it says Mark-1 Plumbing.
Let's go.
I feel like I remember this news story.
This was a news story. This truck was the work truck of a Texas plumber who, ran his own public plumbing business, was a contractor, put his decal on the side along with his, as you can see, blurred out phone number. Thank you, CBS.
Thank you, CBS.
But I assume when the CIA got this, picture in some form or something, or FBI, yeah, we're going to call that number. We're going to talk to Mark.
Well, that might be a one easy lead. Should we? Is it too easy?
Actually, unfortunately, Mark, this all made the internet long before the government thought about reaching out to this poor gentleman. Basically, this picture started circulating the internet of this particular technical that was being used by ISIS in Iraq and Syria, circa 2011, during the ISIS insurgency. And yeah, this dude's business is being advertised on the side of it, and so people are seeing the image
press
on the internet, calling the number, being like, "Hey, fuck you, man! How dare you support something like ISIS?" And really, all this dude did...
he's the dude driving in the parade.
Yeah. They think this guy...
He just sold his truck.
They think that this guy called whatever the ISIS equivalent of Cars for Kids is and donated his F-250.
How can you support your friends in ISIS in Iraq?
Here's the thing that's funny to me years later after hearing this story, is that your ISIS members just kept it.
Yeah.
Just kept it looking... Well, it's a nice truck. We got to keep it looking nice.
They got to the point where they put the ghillie on the side of it to camouflage it.
Very camouflage.
But they left.
They're like, Mark-1 Plumbing? Yeah.
Yeah. Mark's my guy.
Name. That's my gang name now.
We roll. We're the Mark-1 Plumbing crew.
Or someone told them that plumbing meant massive killers or some cool samurai or some shit like that.
But I mean, this does meet all the criteria for sort of the modern equivalent of a technical. Past the Tachanka.
Huge gun on the back of this.
Yeah, this is a light anti-aircraft gun, would be my guess, and or just could be potentially an anti-armored vehicle gun.
But it definitely looks like it
upward.
has the mechanics to turn almost 180.
Yeah, you got a lot of range.
And I assume electric mechanics to raise and lift it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
you've come a long way from your Tachanka.
That's what
even the last one
what Craig here went to 5 years of technical school for, is operating this gun on this truck.
I trust Craig.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to be discussing technicals in this episode.
And that's the term for a truck with a
That
gun
is
in
the
back?
term for a vehicle with a weapon mounted upon it.
Okay.
Our modern day understanding of technicals is civilian vehicles with weapons mounted on them.
Gotcha.
Non-military vehicles with military weapons on.
Absolutely.
Military stuff outside of
an
the
M1
military.
Abrams tank, not a technical, it's a tank.
Yeah.
If you somehow took the gun off of an M1 Abrams tank and put it on a Kia Soul...
Take an airport luggage carrier and throw a tank turret on it.
Original Hummer is a technical.
The
H3.
They were actually just military grade passenger. They were armored passenger vehicles.
They never had guns on them.
Well,
Some
I
of
mean,
them-
Boom booms,
some
no
of
boom
them
booms on the
did.
hum hum?
No, they had boom booms on, but they're military. Now, if you were to go out and take some like suburban mom's
H3.
H3
Yeah.
and put a gun on it, technical.
Yeah, absolutely.
Finally.
The Humvee was not a technical because it was designed to have that weapon on it and be used in a military theater. The Ford they designed the F-250 circa like 2003 or whatever this truck is from. They did not intend for it to have a weapon on it and to be in a theater of war.
Okay. If I put a harpooner on my kayak, is that a technical?
Yeah,
Yeah, totally.
or a battleship. I don't know how it
We're
works
not going
when
to
you're in
have
the
like
water.
an is it sandwich argument
Okay,
there.
okay,
If
okay.
it's- if it's
I
the
got the
cooler
idea.
It is,
I got
you know
there.
where the line
I
is.
do have this in my note. We're not going to deep dive into what technicals are. Other podcasts have done that and done it better than
Oh,
us.
yeah.
I recommend researching and figuring out and then listening to those. Shout out WTYP.
I also want to know which of the three guys has to sit in one of the fold-down bitch seats in the back. And I'm thinking it's Bakablava.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's yeah.
Blah blah blah.
It's this guy who hasn't fully committed to the cause yet and thinks like, maybe I want to go back to my 9-to-5 call
I
center.
want to go back to
Coincidence.
Texas and work
Yeah.
for Mark.
Good. I was gonna say he's the only actual plumber there.
Yeah.
All right, so start off with a question.
That's a good one.
Oh, it's really good.
Why Toyota trucks so good?
Um,
Because
I'm gonna
they
explain
built
it.
different.
because built different.
They are built different, and this is very true. We're going to explore how. But that's, I mean, generally what like the question is surrounding them is, Toyota, just overall, all of their vehicles are built to an immense level of quality, and we'll explore why that is. But Toyota trucks are also just regarded in that like that next level echelon. I've owned 5 Toyota vehicles in my life. 3 of them have surpassed 320,000 miles on them.
Damn.
And just are kept on ticking. I own 2 Toyotas right now. I own a Geo Prism, which is a glorified Toyota Corolla, and a Toyota 4Runner.
I was gonna say
glorified or sidestep.
it's the reverse of a glorified.
It's
right?
a lateral move. It was a way to sell Toyota Corollas to dumb Americans.
It's like the lizard crawling back into the water a little bit and
Yeah.
need some more time before.
It's only have 4 fingers on each paw right now.
arguably the Geo Prism was a lateral move from the Toyota Corolla. But yeah, so why Toyota trucks so good? We're gonna start with the answer of in the beginning they weren't.
Kichiro.
Yes, this is Kijiro or Kichiro Toyota.
Kichiro.
AKA Brad. You guys may remember
Brad,
him
yes.
Yes.
from my previous presentation about like
Is that a
Smokey
new
Nagata.
photo of Brad?
It's
or-
the same one.
He looks
same one?
just as unhappy as I remember.
I clicked
Yeah.
copy and paste from my previous slide
Okay,
deck into this
cool.
for that. And Kaiichiro Toyota, he was the one that wanted to make cars. He's not the first of like the Toyota like family. They were an auto loom manufacturing company.
he wanted to break. He's
But
audio
he's the
business
one
guy.
that wanted to be the Henry Ford of Japan.
Okay.
And effectively was. He obtained that goal. Here we see in the center the Toyota AA. Notice that it has the D. It wasn't until after basically the Toyota G1, which we'll discuss in a moment, that they began to differentiate Toyota, the family, and like their auto loom business from Toyota, the the automobile company.
I assume it was a big boom also for families named Toyota at the time. Like, what?
Just coming
Yes,
up.
we totally. Yeah,
Yeah,
I have
this-
an uncle in the car making business.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know if I was claiming like Emma Roberts to be a member of my family. Yeah, that's my cousin Emma.
Yeah.
Of course.
Oh, yeah,
we go way
Emma.
back. But yes, so this is the Toyota AA, also otherwise known as the A1.
This is kind of a
never
sexy.
better.
This is a sexy little car.
This
Yeah.
is sort of
I'm not a car person.
this
I
is
like this.
basically a Japanese ripoff of a Chrysler Airflow DeSoto from the 1930s.
Looks good.
Early 1930s, like sort of
it's
American
a good bad guy car.
Yeah, it is a good bad guy.
great
car.
bad guy car.
I psychologically, I want to know why the grills of that era of car.
Oh,
What was the hot thing about? And I know like we're going through the same thing with our cars, and like nobody has a window anymore because everything's so pinched. All the windows are pinched, and the grills are huge.
The 20s, 30s. Everything has a really high grill for no reason. Be it trains, be it fucking.
There's a reason for this. You want a big grill on cars like these because cars really in this era didn't have many of them didn't have radiators.
Gotcha.
Like we understood kind of the technology for it. It was just sort of prohibitively expensive to put one in your car, so you had to cool your engine down by driving, and the cold wind blowing on the engine keeps it from overheating. The bad side of this, you can't really sit idling for very long because your car's just going to overheat. That's what a radiator does for you, the ability to like idle.
Was this a Toyota thing or was this a general thing?
Oh no, this is the 1930s an automobile. So pretty much many people are putting radiators in their cars. I'm not saying that nobody did, but it was usually something reserved for like luxury automobiles at the time. That
Elitist.
level of like technology and like the amount of extra effort and parts that it took to add that sort of liquid cooling system to a vehicle.
I feel like Indiana Jones had a chase in one of these. I think in Temple of Doom.
Possibly. Maybe
or
not,
something
though.
similar.
Like the Toyota AA was made. The A1, which is what this is a replica of, which is the prototype of the Toyota AA. Yeah. Only 3 were made.
Okay, probably not then.
They made the A1. This is what Keiichiro really wanted to bring to the masses first. This is what he wanted to be Japan's Ford Model T. But unfortunately for the time, the economy in the 1930s in Japan was still incredibly underdeveloped. They had industrialized, but they hadn't like quite created a middle class yet. Like that hadn't had time to formulate within Japan. So you don't have a large populace of people who you can sell the luxury of like a passenger car to at the time. What you could potentially build, though, so after the 3 A1s, they got them built. Keiichiro actually went and took one to the grave of his father, Sakichi Toyota, as sort of like a symbolic gesture of like, I did it, Dad. Like you gave me the money and like the resources to start a car company.
Like as he rode in one to the funeral, or like he buried the car.
Yeah.
With
he just drove one A1 to his father's gravesite. And likely had a quiet moment of contemplation,
nice.
With his dad. Hey, I did good, Dad.
Who's laughing? Who's dropping now, Dad?
We don't know what happened in that moment. It could have been vindictive. It could have been respectful and reverent. No one truly knows, but we do know that he took one there. And not long after that, has decided that they were going to pivot for what car they were going to bring to the Japanese masses first.
Okay.
And instead decided upon the Toyota G1.
And I apologize if this was covered in your earlier episode. Being a Henry Ford Model T kind of as like a blueprint for this, was he trying to make this like a mass production car for an everybody, or was this still like a luxury symbol sort of a deal? Like it's not binary.
They're behind Japan, at least, and particularly the Toyotas. There were other like people making automobiles in Japan at the time. Large corporations like Mitsubishi, things of that nature. So like they weren't the first or only ones making cars in Japan at the time. But it's hard. Like development of a vehicle is an incredibly expensive and laborious and very long process. And oftentimes it takes a lot of money to do that. And so when you're a small fledgling auto manufacturer, really almost always your choice is to make an expensive vehicle that has to be sold as somewhat of a luxury, especially when you live in a world where there is no like robust middle class just clamoring to have a passenger car for their family.
That middle class is on the horizon.
It's on its way, for sure. But so, like I said, instead they pivoted and went with the Toyota G1. As we can see, it's a truck. This is Toyota's first vehicle for the masses.
It's effectively the first half. I mean, not just body-wise, but I assume elongating the chassis of the whole thing costs more.
It's more material, yes.
I assume same size engine and everything in there. It's just the front half of it.
These had a 65 horsepower inline 6-cylinder engine, which honestly isn't too shabby for the time. It sounds very like, I mean, nowadays, like, even an older vehicle like my 4Runner has a 4-cylinder engine that made 150 horsepower when it was brand new, and is considered to be a pretty underpowered car in terms of horsepower.
But you only need this to get down your paved roads, your dirt roads. Like you aren't taking this off-roading. This doesn't scream. This doesn't scream technical to me.
Yeah.
Not
but I'm curious.
Yet, no, not at all. The reason they had chosen the G1 is because it could be sort of also sold as like a piece of like agricultural machinery.
Sure.
Okay.
Like
okay.
your Japanese, like
you got a market for that.
Retail worker at the time who like works at a fish stall may not have the kind of money to go out and buy a Toyota AA so that his family can get around and like leave Tokyo for the weekend and go out in the countryside. Like that's just too much of a luxury. But you can potentially convince a farmer up in like the Hokkaido region, up in like northern Japan, that like you can make an investment in a Toyota G1 and like we have this pickup. So, you know, you have a horse that doesn't need to be rest or fed. You have like it's stronger. It's 65 horses.
It's creating
in
small
strength.
businesses.
You can put stuff in it. Like it's something that can be used utilitarianly to like help out someone who may be willing to view it as more of a business investment rather than like a luxury good in which to pamper yourself, which is kind of what cars were for a lot of like that early period of cars.
Mm-hmm. It had functionality to it.
The thing about the Toyota G1 is it basically shares nothing with like subsequent Toyota truck models. It was wildly unreliable. When Toyota brought the G1 to the 1935 Japanese Automotive Show, like their grand stage where you get to like sort of
and we're talking 1935 automotive show.
Yes.
So there's only like 5 to show, huh?
Yeah.
Basically, yeah.
At all, like that's it.
Don't let the door hit you.
There was 3 for every year before that. Now there's 5. Big news. So Toyota loaded up that bed with pretty much almost a whole spare G1's worth of parts because they were so worried that they would suffer like catastrophic like malfunctions and breaks on their way to Tokyo for the show. They apparently only suffered a few minor little breaks, and you know the spare parts helped them get there and make it to the stage. But then they had to sell this to the masses. And once again, you know, like I said, this was still considered a bit of an investment. Like this is a huge expense. And so the only people who bought it were really like somewhat successful, like farm workers and like people who wanted to just support the like fledgling Japanese automotive industry.
People who could invest and saw it as an investment.
Exactly. And almost like with a nationalistic sense of like pride.
This was the ramping up of it,
like,
too.
I want Japanese automobiles to do well. That's why I'm going to buy this piece of shit truck that's going to break. And so at the time that they sold a few, enough to sort of keep the business afloat, and they broke. And oftentimes the Toyota viewed this as an opportunity in which to improve. So they would, anytime you had written or like gone to wherever your public phone was to call the Toyota headquarters to let them know, hey, that piece of shit truck you sold me broke, they would send an actual like Toyota engineer to you to not only fix the problem, but to analyze like how it broke. Okay. And so that they could, that's next
the most
level
Japanese
of G1s
thing I've ever
that broke, like they wouldn't break.
But it's wonderful though.
Absolutely, yes.
I mean, that's how you build a customer. That's how you build a company that we still know of today in the 30s. You give, you know.
This is the most successful worldwide automotive maker.
Like when you back a Kickstarter and you get shit from it, it's not like John Johnson comes down to your house and like fixes your game pieces.
Nope.
Like you're on your fucking own.
Or sometimes you don't even get what you fucking paid for.
Yeah.
And then Kickstarter's like, that sucks, but you read the terms and conditions, right? Oh, no. Sorry, you're out of $60.
You're-
Not
Yeah.
to call Toyota at this time a Kickstarter, because
No.
I mean they
No,
have
they-
the means to. They've been producing looms. I think of them as like a Japanese John Deere.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
guess at this point in
it
time,
was a very
but they're
successful
breaking
business.
into automotive.
Yes, and a successful business that was just fundamentally changing what they made, from looms to vehicles. And they brought a lot of their know-how, and not only that, their philosophy with them. So,
Okay.
how do we get from a super unreliable, constantly breaking, very handmade Toyota G1 to what we know now, like my 4Runner with a bajillion miles on it?
Okay.
We are then going to discuss.
Oh, it's so cute! The Type 95. Look at it.
There's going to be some time that we need to build up. So, we are going to talk about Toyota Going to War, Failure Edition. So here we have the Kurogane Type 95.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
It's like a fucking Advance Wars fucking vehicle. Like,
It-
here's
they're-
what your general rides in.
There
like,
very well could be, this could be referenced in it. This was one of Japan, like the Japanese military's like first vehicles. This was begun to be developed in 1934. So along the same time Toyota's developing its first vehicles to present to the masses, the Japanese government is already asking them, hey, can you work with a few other auto manufacturers and motorcycle manufacturers to give us something that is like somewhat dependable, reliable, all-wheel drive that can help us out in some of our military campaigns in like Manchuria or the Philippines. We are on the cusp and or like the starting points of World War II.
This is, I mean, what year is this? That this
So
little guy?
33?
This began like they were
33?
tapped by the Japanese government in like 1934. 1935 is when they introduced.
You're
the
still
G1.
pre-invasion of China at
Yeah.
that time for World War II.
Yes.
But
They're gearing up for it though.
But you got to gear up for it because World War I was kind of the big teaching lesson of like, hey, horses die and get scared when you shell them for like 6 minutes straight. Like, but you know what doesn't get scared is a vehicle that you can just kind of like protect for a bit, and that's what you can run like. You know, your foodstuffs for people that are way out in the ammo, your shit like that. Like we can mechanize.
Imagine
that part.
getting it to him faster.
Now, this looks like it just carries 2 dudes. Like this doesn't carry anything. This is not a truck.
At one point, it
like
did.
the Jeep allegory over here. Can.
We'll talk about the AK-10 in a second. But no, so yes, the Kurogane Type 95. So basically, it's not necessarily a failure in the sense that it didn't work. Like they made this vehicle for 10 years, for the Japanese military as a collective effort with themselves. Like I said, some motorcycle manufacturers that the biggest like contribution of which is a V-twin engine. So it had a 2-cylinder V2 engine, just like a Harley Davidson motorcycle, which gave it like a whopping like 36 horsepower. But it did produce a lot of torque, which is more important when you're driving where there aren't roads.
Yeah.
Like being able to go fast and having a high top speed doesn't matter for shit when you're like there hasn't been a road for miles.
Yeah,
And-
Absolutely.
and it's small. It's dune buggy like.
Mhm.
So
It's
it's the
got
kind
a-
of thing where you can definitely go over some bumps and hurdles, and you can take some turns at some speed without worrying if everything was more elongated.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, you're not at much of a risk to high center, and you're picking up intuitively on it. This is what in 4-wheeler like off-roading
Even though this
communities.
is a failure, like
It's more of a failure because like this wasn't Toyota. Like other companies contributed to this process. Like I don't necessarily, and like the details were somewhat murky of like how much of the Kurogane Type 95 is Toyota Motor Corporation. I can't really tell you what is and what isn't made by them.
Okay.
It was successful as a vehicle, but it wasn't like Toyota didn't make it 100% like from scratch. It does have that perfect square wheelbase that like you would see in like Jeeps, and Ford Broncos and Chevy Blazers. Like there's a fundamental, like if your suspension is more square, you run less risk of like high centering, where like you're going over a bump and your front wheels have cleared the bump, your back wheels haven't yet quite encountered the bump, and your like the peak of the bump is now up in the guts of your vehicle. Now, neither of your wheels are touching the hill or the bump, and so you're just spinning because you're basically teeter-tottering on
I've
top
only
of...
really seen it with buses in real life.
Yeah,
which makes
I mean,
sense.
Any long wheelbase car is at risk of high centering at the most minimal of like rises of roadway. Or lack of roadway if you're off-road.
But you want something that can go off-road and over hills and grassy hills, and you plan for the best. You don't plan to be like, well, this is going to be going through like muck. You're not going to be battlefielding through this.
And one of the craziest things about the Type 95 is this was made 6 years before the first Jeep model was ever produced.
Oh, yeah.
The Bantam Jeep, made for Asian military campaigns in 1940 by the company that would inevitably become Willys Overland, who made the Jeeps for World War II. This is 6 years before that, so they had their ideas in the right place for creating a like functional, rugged, reliable off-road vehicle. And it worked for that for quite some time. It's just kind of weak, so it's not very fast. You're maybe not going to get out of danger in a super quick way. And it's, canvas over top.
Well, yeah, and canvas over top and 2 people.
Yeah, not super effective as a people mover in war. And that's where we come up to the Toyota AK-10. Now, this is where they got a Jeep. So this was made in 1941. In the 1940s, the Bantam Jeep had made its way into the Philippine theater. And the Japanese forces got their hands on one intact and sent it back to Japan, where the Japanese sent it back to the homeland, where the Japanese government basically gave it to Toyota and said, all right,
what am I looking at?
Retro engineer one of these. And this is what they came up with.
And it looks functionally like a Jeep, but what matters, I guess, is the Toyota part of it.
I mean, this is 100% Toyota at this point. Like they made all of the parts for it. Like,
but we're in failure edition. Like, what's bad about this? Because this looks like a stripped down Toyota. Like, yep, we use 30% less metal in the frame and the chassis. Gets people from A to B. Yeah, no protection on it. Yep, one direct shot from any gun, any caliber. Somebody could use a water pistol and penetrate the front of this thing.
I mean, granted, the Willys Jeep was a bit of the same.
Oh, yeah.
They're not super armored vehicles. They're meant to be light and fast, and hopefully being used in theaters of combat where, like, things aren't currently exploding.
No, but this is the lighter, faster version of that.
This is meant for taking boys with guns to the places where the boys with guns need to be.
Yeah.
And as
it ain't sexy.
As we know from World War II history, who won the Pacific Theater?
I think it's still for debate.
The audience.
I would have to say USA, and the Willys Overland Jeep. The Toyota AK, well, decent. They did a good job copying the homework. Didn't quite build a vehicle that, one, could win the war, or two, wasn't necessarily known. Like, if it was super reliable, they would have kept making it.
Yeah.
They didn't. So,
spoiler alert.
How do we go from a relatively failed passenger truck and 2 military vehicles to being essentially the choice platform of a technical?
This is a good question, because
it's got to be accessible.
Well, you mentioned that, like, the failure of the truck, like, they loaded it up with parts. So I assume, like, parts are easy to make. It's not the car. It's not the car that's easy to make. The parts are easy to make.
Or they're easily accessible.
Yeah.
It must be something with they have perfected the simplest form to create the simplest task, and that information must be so evenly distributed amongst the world
Yeah.
that it keeps their product on the road.
That brings us to our next slide. We're going to talk about manufacturing and business management philosophy.
Hell
Let's
yeah.
go.
Hell
Two
yeah.
ideas at the same time. Bro.
Diedrich Bader as Lawrence from Office Space. Fuck yeah. I'm just putting it in here to hype up what the super dry content of what we're about to discuss next is.
Oh, we'll make
I'm
jokes.
I'm gonna try and liven
I'll
it up
make
the best as I can.
Shout out to
And honestly,
memegenerator.net.
I'm
Yeah.
a little passionate about this, so hopefully that is going to come through while we talk about these subjects.
Okay.
So, slide 8, I'm going to take you guys on a reminder. This was in the Smokey Nagati episode.
Okay.
This is the concept of judoka, which is somewhat translatable into automation with the human element. So
Okay.
the basic concept of judoka, as we can see here in this diagram that somewhat fits it out, you start the process by manufacturing whatever it is you make. It doesn't matter. Judoka can be applied to any manufacturing process.
Yeah.
It just happens to be
It's
auto
the
looms,
process of
then
automizing
vehicles.
it.
You start with a human.
Yeah.
Preferably a
Hey, I'm one of
skilled-
those.
Me too. Helpfully a skilled craftsman, and they're doing the entirety of the process. So when we apply it to Toyota, this is making cars or trucks such as the G1.
They're filling the molds to make the brake pads. You know,
Every
it's
step of the-
people running presses and shipping things. And
Every step of the process is done by human hands until you feel like you have absolutely perfected the process.
Yeah.
That your master craftsman has said, like, no, this process is so refined, we cannot make it any better. And that's when you begin to automate it.
you make a
slightly.
robot who can do it better.
You add you make a machine that can assist in helping speed up the process a little bit, helping make consistency of product, but you still have the human involved.
Yeah, you have the human.
The human
element in
needs
there.
to watch during this phase of the judoka cycle that, you know, hey, we need to make sure that the machine is capable of living up to our standards of what we were able to perfect as human craftsmen. Once that you've gotten this, like, the sign off from the human that's been monitoring the automation, you add, you know, sensors and automate other steps in the process so that you've automated it in its entirety. Now, this is a relatively scary concept to, particularly
class.
nowadays with like the rise of AI, things like that. I would argue that judoka, even though Toyota is an incredibly successful capitalist company, is somewhat Marxian in its philosophy. That what you should do is you should automate stages of the labor cycle. One, to create to create more time for your laborers. Ideally, you wouldn't replace your laborers with automation. You would just simply free up your laborers to be more
Proceed on a new thing.
Yes.
thoughtful and creative to
They
work
can't
on
move.
new processes.
Yeah.
To continue to push the envelope.
Yeah.
And also, you know, you are making the process more efficient, more time saving. So, you know, you're
The most basic
reducing
tasks
the
are
amount
taken
of
care
time.
of. The next most basic path will do.
Yeah,
Well, and you're also
yeah.
reducing
We-
the amount of time your laborers need to be there.
Yeah.
Already with
freeing
50
them up.
hours, we have
Yeah.
so many laborers moving so many boxes. We have machines doing that now. So now the human laborers can open up and find out what's in those boxes until we've perfected that. To make a machine to open up and check those boxes.
Or-
but we still have the human element. Like, it feels like a kicking it down the chain in a interesting way. But also, like, I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid on this. This is just replacing workers in the nicest way possible.
It is. And it doesn't speak on the morality of it.
It
only speaks on the process
It's not
of it.
like your 200 workers who
Yeah.
were moving boxes are going to be the same 200 workers.
The reality of it all. The reality of it all is
3
that-
years later.
yeah.
Yes.
I think
Because
the idea was
it's
that
applied in a certain way.
It's a very uncomfortable place to be in the growth of judoka, but I assume once it's established and the thing is perfected, then it's like, okay, now we have the 50 jobs that open up for people who check the machines and to make sure things are working right on that end.
Yeah.
Sort of a deal. Like, there's just,
We'll see some other philosophies. Granted, I did make a big jump here in Jidoka, re-describing the process.
Yep.
We'll talk about some of the other philosophies that Toyota puts in place.
We're going to learn all the forms, all the
Not
bendings.
all of them. I'll introduce these sort of episode by episode, but we are going to touch on 2 more things. The other thing that I found super fascinating in researching for this episode is a concept that the Toyota engineers who were out doing home visits to people who had bought the G1, fixing their problem and reporting back to Toyota on what the issue was and how the process could be improved, and so that doesn't happen in future Toyota passenger vehicles, is something that was invented by Keiichiro's father, Saikichi. Jidoka was already, established Toyota manufacturing principle, as was our next slide here, the 5 whys.
Oh my god.
So here we also see in the picture an Ishikawa, or in Japanese, a fishbone diagram for the 5 whys. And here we can see we have things like cause 1, sub-cause, cause 2, sub-cause, so on and so forth. It's the 5 whys just because I think it sounds snappy, and honestly, the process could be anywhere as simple as maybe 2 whys to infinitesimal whys. But what the what this is a production philosophy method developed by Saikichi in his Autoloom factories, and it's a way of analyzing a problem much like a toddler would when you're trying to reason something to them. Just keep asking why until you get to the root cause of what the problem is. So, for example, my problem, I was late to work. Why? Because I woke up late. Why? Because the alarm on my phone didn't go off.
Oh, yeah.
Why? Because my phone was dead.
Yeah.
Why? Because I didn't charge it. So the root cause of this problem is I didn't charge my phone. It didn't have the battery to then power the alarm to wake me up on time so that I could be to work.
But you have Toyota as a company doing this about
why did this part break?
We have 47 people whose gaskets seem to have broken. Well, why did their gaskets break?
Because it's made of this material. Why
yeah,
did we choose to make this material?
Yeah.
Because it's this cost effective.
That's fun. That sounds like very fun board meetings and not just kind of I don't know, Jeremy.
Yeah.
Jeremy bought the materials as he's over there picking his fucking nose.
Yeah.
Using trash as materials, buying Bitcoin.
So
we don't know.
Yeah, you send Jerry, you either fire Jerry or you send him out with more money to buy better materials to make that part out of, so it stops fucking breaking. And so this is a corporate philosophy. They want everyone who's working for a Toyota to constantly be doing these processes, this thought experiment whenever they're encountering
problems. Are we talking
problems.
ground up? Are we talking maintenance?
Yeah.
To manufacturing?
Absolutely.
To office business practices?
But this is a huge guiding philosophy of Toyota in when they're making a product, is to, whenever you find a problem, find out the root cause, solve it, see if that creates new problems. If it does, go back to the lab, keep asking why until you found the root cause, and just keep continuously repeating this process and continually refining your manufacturing style and the product in which you're making until you're making something that's just absolutely
a beast.
Yeah, it's
the best
over-engineered.
form of itself.
Toyota's always prided itself on over-engineering things. We'll see time and time again in any of the times I will talk about Toyota. We talked about it with the Toyota Supra and the 2JZ engine. That is an engine that makes 276 horsepower.
Heavy quotes.
Per the Japanese gentleman's agreement of auto manufacturers. It was really more like 320. But it was so over-engineered that backyard mechanics can go buy a bigger turbocharger, slap that thing on there, and put more PSI than the manufacturer ever recommended putting through the engine. And now you've got a motor that makes 276 horsepower that's also now making 800, 900, 1,000 horsepower. And you've turned your little sporty grand touring car for the masses that costs 40 grand into a fucking missile that can take on any Ferrari or Lamborghini on the street that costs easily 8 to 9 times the price.
Something about those Toyotas, man. They're built different.
They
Built
are
different.
built different. And a big root cause of this philosophy, and what I think may be one of the most like Marxian philosophies of Toyota, we're about to discuss here on this next program or slide. It is Kaizen.
Oh, change.
Yes, a
But
Japanese.
good change.
Change
Yes,
is good.
as we can see, we have Kaizen. It is a portmanteau of the kanji Kai for change and Zen good. Overall, you're making changes for the overall good. So it's a methodology of continuous improvement. Toyota's philosophy is that any change that improves the process in the product is ultimately good and should be implemented, regardless of time, cost, like, you know, having to push back deadlines, things of that nature.
Yeah.
Toyota wants to make the best product they can.
They
and
won't
release it.
compromise.
Exactly. So much so
Kaizen.
that Toyota applies to everyone in the production process, much like we were saying, from the ground up. If you
Okay.
are involved in the manufacturing of Toyota vehicles, no matter if you're just the guy that puts the plastic cap on the engine for where the oil fill is, if you see a way in which the process could be done that makes a better quality product or could be done more efficiently, you have the ability to stop the production line. You can stop
You have
the
big,
whole
the
machine.
big red button.
No way.
Yeah, everyone has access to the big red button. That is at the core.
They have to be so educated on how the whole process is
But
done.
what you're doing is you're trusting the people who are doing the work day in and
True.
day out.
Oh, true.
That they know what's best
Yeah.
for the work they're doing. Like, how often have we worked as American laborers or just laborers in the Western world or in any company that doesn't institute Kaizen philosophy? You know your job could be done better. But you're not incentivized to do either because, one, the nails that stick out get hammered, and two, those who do good at work get rewarded with more work.
Yeah.
Whereas in a Kaizen system, those who do good work get rewarded by, hey, now your job is easier in the way that you have recommended. And, you know, you shut down production. Like, you're costing us time and money on this thing that we're producing to sell to people. And you're not going to be yelled at for doing so. You're going to be heard and taken seriously about what your suggestion is, and it's going to be given an honest college try to see if it is better.
Cool.
That's like democracy of the workplace.
Yeah.
Like, this is what unions are all about. Like, democratizing the workplace, creating a more, like, you know, democratic, institution where everyone's say in the work that's being done is given equal weight, no matter what your role within the company is.
It comes from a culture of keeping pride in what they do as well.
Absolutely.
Whereas I feel like other cultures, the American culture itself, being that there is no pride in the service to the economy. Whereas in Japan, especially during pre-war, during war, there was so much pride in contributing to the economy.
Well, that and also like a reluctance from the Japanese culture to be a nail that sticks out, to be hammered in a way.
Yeah.
So you don't push the big red button culturally unless you've got a really fucking. We aren't listening to Stoner Greg's ideas of how he can make the deli at Walmart better.
Unless he's got a really good idea and pushes the button.
No, it's a great concept. It
Yeah.
should be adopted, but it's kind of like, no, unless somebody's got a really good idea, nobody's standing up to be like, we're stopping everything.
Yeah. And a part of Kaizen is something that Toyota has trademarked, and you'll hear a lot in like modern capitalist jargon of just-in-time production. You've heard about this, like it's what caused the supply line fuck-ups of the past few years. And it's oftentimes like you make the product as there's demand for it, is our Western understanding of it. In Toyota's understanding of just-in-time production is you're finishing the product in the time that it takes. So Toyota's philosophy is like, if you finished a production car ahead of schedule, like say you thought like, hey, you know, we're making a new Toyota 4Runner that we're going to be using in time for the 2026 model year. Say we finish everything and we're ready to start producing those new 4Runners by 2025, mid 2025. In June, so you have 6 months ahead of schedule on when you wanted to start pumping out those new 4Runners. Toyota's philosophy is like, well, what? Like you had 6 months to make it better. Why didn't you spend that 6 months doing that?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Congrats. You now have an extra 6 months to make your design.
Yeah, like we're not gonna start yet. Spend
There's
the
no extra
remaining
credit
6 months
for finishing early.
Not at all. Nope. You're to be the
Means
first
you
one to
didn't do
finish
it to the best ability.
Yeah. So that's the whole part of the just-in-time aspect of
It's my
the
favorite
Kaizen.
person from NSYNC, by the way.
And an example for this too is in the mid 2000s, the Ford plant in Dearborn, Michigan, would stop production on average 2 times per week.
Really?
At the same time, in America, in Kentucky, let's look up the exact town, Georgetown, Kentucky, where the America's largest auto plant is, Toyota's plant. They are the biggest in all of America, even. On average, production was shut down 2,000 times a week.
Wow.
Full halt, dead stop.
Full red
Someone's
light.
got an
stop.
idea that could make our cars that much better.
When
and this
was
is
this?
in the mid 2000s too. This is
word.
decades into when Toyota has a reputation for being, you know, reliable, efficient, fuel efficient.
They're
super
coasting.
Easy
They're at the
to
top.
Work on. Yeah, they've been on top of the game forever when it comes to affordable, reliable, like passenger vehicles that just won't fucking break. And they're still, like, at that point in time, 2,000 times a week, they're being like, hey, we could do this slightly different. What if we put the robot on this many, like, milliseconds in between, you know, putting in spot welds on a frame, so that way, you know, it's a little bit more accurate. There's a little less, like, slag that may or may not carry over in between welds.
I assume there's no dumb idea policy.
Which sounds insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, because 2,000 a week.
I granted, like, if you take a what we would understand as like a typical workplace and introduced a Kaizen philosophy, there's going to be an awkward growing phase. There are going to be growing pains in the process where there are people who are too dumb to know that their ideas are dumb, are speaking up, and there are people who are too, like, socially anxious but smart to step up and actually, like, get forward. You have to, like, let that culture permeate, and, like, everyone needs to buy in for the process to work the way that it should.
Yeah.
To create the culture.
And for example, this is being implemented. Both Subaru and BMW, two pretty different automakers, one from Japan, the other one from Europe, both have instituted Kaizen into their production philosophy. Which it is no coincidence that the two auto manufacturers that Toyota works pretty closely hand in hand with are both Subaru and BMW now.
Interesting.
Toyota works with Subaru to make the Toyota 86 or the Subaru BRZ. They're the same car. One has all-wheel drive for Subaru. The other one's rear-wheel drive for Toyota. But effectively, they're mostly built the exact same way from the base. Because Subaru was willing to institute that philosophy. That was the only way Toyota was going to agree with them that, like, yes, this is how we make cars and you should make cars too. Same thing with BMW. That's how we get the Supra or the new BMW Z4. Similar platforms. They do kind of stop production at a certain point, and then BMW does their thing and Toyota does their own thing. But, you know, it's the same bones. It's the same frame, the same drivetrain. A lot of, like, 90% of the car is the same.
Okay.
With those two. And those are the ones that, like, have applied Kaizen philosophy to their production process enough for Toyota to be like, yes, we will co-produce a vehicle.
You're
with
cool
you.
enough to hang.
Other, like,
You Kaizen, bro.
a big part of the post 2008 American auto bailout was basically American auto manufacturers going hat in hand to Toyota and being like, all right, how do we do TPS, the Toyota production system?
Yeah.
Like, how do you do it the way you do it? And have begun to institute these philosophies in and of themselves. So it's not just like Toyota products, like this is now permeating into auto manufacturers worldwide. Soon could be, everyone's making good vehicles, and the ideal future where, no matter who your vehicle comes from, at least it's gone through the Jidoka and Kaizen process with the people producing the product and analyzing the problems, asking the 5 whys, to the point where maybe you don't have so many hoopties just from the fucking factory anymore.
Yeah.
Now, granted, this doesn't always work. Toyota's also worked pretty closely with the Lotus. That's how they kind of got their sports car game going in the 60s and 70s.
Okay.
And Lotuses are still unreliable pieces of crap. So there wasn't as much in that cultural exchange as they are in some other ones moving forward. All right, so now that we know the Toyota's manufacturing,
Just remember, Zach. Just remember, this is going to connect
This is
back
gonna
to the
connect
future.
back to the future.
It's gonna
At
blow my
some
fucking
point.
mind. I know it.
It's going to get there.
We're now about to meet some of the heroes of our story.
Okay, Superman,
Aquaman.
Batman,
Truckman.
the
Hero
Land
number
Cruiser.
1, the Land Cruiser.
Look at
That's
this
a sexy bitch.
Yes, it is. It's an incredibly sexy bitch.
Look at that snorkel. You
Yeah.
can take this bitch underwater all the way up to your fucking eyebrows, and you're gonna be good.
Yeah, you at this point, before your engine began sucking in water, which is not what engines like, because water does not compress and it will hydrolock your motor. Anytime
This is news to me.
Anytime your car is breathing, don't drive your car in large bodies of water, because inevitably your car will breathe in that water. And much like when you breathe in water, it fills your lungs, and then there's no more room for anything other
There's
than
no
the
room
water
for fire
there.
in an engine if
Yeah.
you got water in there.
Boom.
Yes.
No room for gasoline.
But in this, you can drive this thing deeper than the window. At this point, the cabin is filling up, but your engine is still running.
You're getting a nice 6 inches below the surface view of a hippo that's about ready to fucking bite the side of your Land Cruiser.
And this is obviously a well preserved and or restored FJ40 model. It's one of Toyota's longest lasting models of the Land Cruiser. They produced this for well over 25 years, generally unchanged, and sold worldwide. This is the FJ40 model. We'll get a bit into chassis codes, which I know you love from my Supra episode.
Yeah.
I want to know what the red guy is, because I know it's
That's
a
a-
snorkel on
that's
the
a jack.
driver's side. Oh, it's a jack.
That's an off-road jack, and it's super ubiquitous. Like anyone who off-roads, no matter what you're off-roading, that jack, it has a somewhat wobbly base. And basically, if you're stuck off-road on a hill in the woods, you can somewhat get this jack in a good enough position where that base tilts enough that you can kind of get to the angle that your car is. You're going to want to chalk your wheels with something so the car doesn't roll once you start lifting it up. But this is how you jack up your car when you're in the middle of nature. And Jeeps, everyone uses that thing. They're sketchy as hell.
I can imagine, but I just like that it clips onto your fucking vehicle like it's a fucking action figure accessory.
Ready to go. And we got ourselves a bull bar here with some additional fog lights. We got a Warn brand winch by the looks of it. So there's very little this place can't go. But the Land Cruiser, I see by the shock of you guys, you haven't seen many FJ40s. There's not a ton of them on the road still, or at least, I don't know, here, you don't see them very often.
Yeah.
We would know them better probably by the J80 one, which looks like a 4Runner like mine, but a little bit bigger.
Okay.
And you would most likely sort of know as the ultimate soccer mom mobile because it had 3 rows of seats. You could get 9
Was it
fucking people in
an answer
it.
to the Blazer or the Tahoe or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, in the 90s, everyone was getting bigger, longer, just behemoth versions of their trucks that they had added a like exterior shell over and added additional rows of seating to. The sport utility vehicle, which first time ever in published news of the term sport utility vehicle, was the Toyota 4Runner. Even though other vehicles that fit the category existed beforehand, like the Ford Bronco or the Chevy Blazer, the first time anyone thought to describe a vehicle as that was the Toyota 4Runner. But so we have the Land Cruiser, known to be mostly something to get the kids to and from soccer practice, then fill up the back of it with a bunch of shit from Costco that you probably don't need, and
a bunch of anti-aircraft guns from Costco.
Yeah, I mean, obviously not the best base for a technical because it's covered. You can't really mount a weapon into the back of it.
Oh, give me a saw in a couple hours.
But yes, so this is an indomitable vehicle that basically can be driven in any environment. Part of Toyota's global sales strategy was the J40. So as Toyota in the 50s and 60s began to explore auto markets outside of Japan, they combined the FJ40 Land Cruiser with the Toyota Crown, which was a very cute little passenger car who, on second thought, I should have had a picture of. But they sold them somewhat side by side to
talk it up. I mean,
to draw people
like
in.
A boy car and a girl car. Like
I mean,
the kid.
The Toyota Crown, it looked like, I don't know, like one of the, like a 1950s sleek car, maybe not necessarily a Bel Air, but a little bit more of a like fastback. It was very tiny. You could get 4 people into it. And it had, a small, not very powerful inline-4 motor.
It's a little 4-person roadster.
But just, they've been hammering at it since the Toyota A1. They've been applying Judoka and Kaizen for, 2 decades almost at this point, to making a passenger car. And the Crown was incredibly successful as a lot of countries, as a global middle class is sort of rising, people wanted cars, and in the markets Toyota had chosen to sell, they paired the Crown with the Land Cruiser, so you kind of got both sides of like, hey, are you a cosmopolitan person who just needs a little fuel efficient vehicle in which to get around and get outside the city whenever you want to? Or do you live out in the countryside and you need something that can like get around in places where, vehicles have a really hard time getting around? But both of these items...
You want one for streets or do you want one for dirts?
You want one for streets or one for sheets? That's me.
But yeah, one of the... that philosophy, like you drew customers in, and once they had owned a Toyota vehicle, they understood, oh shit, this thing is affordable, it's fucking reliable as hell, it just won't fucking die, and I can work on it. Like, I have half a fucking brain and a set of wrenches, and so on the rare fucking occasion I need to maintain it or something does break, I can do it myself. I don't need to take it in to some specialized, like, mechanic, like a Ferrari or a Lamborghini. Or anything made.
Or a Ford.
Pretty much
you don't have to go down to Michael Lamborghini's where he scams you every time and tries to...
I mean, Ford's not necessarily a bad, parallel. No. That was part of why Ford was so massively successful.
Found on roadside dead.
Yeah,
that's
but,
what they say.
First on race day, brother.
Fix or repair
but
daily.
Also fourth on race day.
But also 5th on race day?
Did not finish.
14th on race day.
But I mean, it was the allure of the backyard mechanics that if your car does break, hey, you only spend $100 on parts rather than going to a mechanic getting bent over for $450.
Yeah.
When you're adding the parts plus their labor to the process. And so that was a very successful global marketing strategy with this vehicle and the very cute little Crown that helped Toyota build its global reputation for building quality automobiles. And how did we get to the Land Cruiser or the
Okay, we're getting closer.
The J40? It is the spiritual successor to the AK-10, which we saw earlier, that Toyota had retro-manufactured by copying Jeep's homework. This vehicle was made instead of the early 1940s when America and Japan were at opposition with each other. This instead was manufactured in the 1950s.
Okay.
Where
Post-war. Post-Warski.
America had done a bunch of war crimes against Japan, and then effectively wrote their constitution. And Toyota was a huge benefactor of, I guess, this like business.
Yeah, we'll throw money at you. You throw
domination
money at
relationship.
us. You make some cars.
But Toyota in America, as it is wont to do, was at war with another fucking country.
No.
This time, Korea.
What?
No.
And you know what's super fucking expensive? Cross-Pacific vehicle shipments. So instead of sending Willys Overland Jeeps all the way over to Korea,
They gave him the recipe.
they gave him everything, man. They just turned loose them like, hey, here's everything of how Willys Overland makes Jeeps. Please manufacture us a vehicle in which we can use over in the Korean theater. And Toyota came
Pretty
up
please.
with 2 different models.
I promise not to copy your homework. I'll change a couple things here or there. I'll give it a big fucking snorkel. But I mean,
it looks like a Jeep. Yeah,
This is an 80s iteration of the Land Cruiser, I assume?
this was anywhere between 1960 and 1984.
Okay, so they didn't change really at all through that. Just
There were
improved.
some facelifts, but those were sold alongside this model because it was so popular.
Gotcha.
That like we can't stop selling the J40. Whether it is a FJ or BJ40 is a
Nice.
different matter. Yes,
Nice.
I know. BJ, very funny. America took their Willys to Japan and got themselves a BJ,
Nice.
as the joke goes.
That's cute.
All that stands for is the type of fuel that the vehicle takes.
Big juice?
FJ take gasoline.
Okay.
BJs take diesel.
Yeah, damn right they do.
And typically in military application, you want diesel. It's just
Diesel's nuts.
It's you get a little bit of better fuel economy out of it.
your crowd of ones.
You can kind of make diesel kind of out of anything. Like you can melt down animal fat and
yeah.
inevitably turn it into diesel.
That's why biodiesel got so popular.
Yeah.
You can just go out to local fry shops and be like, hey, just leave a bucket out for me.
Yeah. So typically, military vehicles tend to go towards diesel. Also, diesel engines tend to generate a little bit more torque, which is super important when you're going through war-torn battlefields and you need to get up over fucking weird terrain. That torque is going to matter more than the horsepower. So we had the FJ and BJ options for the American military industrial complex that was now fucking over Korea after, it had successfully fucked over Japan.
They said we're not done in the Pacific yet.
No, we're not done
They
yet
said
in Southeastern Asia.
We got so many more men left that we just need to throw them somewhere.
But one thing I thought was somewhat interesting about like the initial models as they were being tested is the like quality assurance guy, Ichiro Taira, took a BJ model to Mount Fuji. He drove that little BJ right up a mountain, and he made it all the way to the 6th stage of the mountain, which I couldn't find like definitive numbers for, but Mount Fuji is like 12,300 some odd feet. So he was making it roughly anywhere
Tiny.
between 7,000 and 9,000 feet
Wow.
up the mountain, which is further than any vehicle had ever been driven up the mountain.
That's a hell of a self-commercial, like self-promotion. Like, well, it does it.
Yeah.
So they kind of knew they had a little something on their hands. They sent it off to Korea, but they also kept in their pockets the design and inevitably marketed and sold it as a consumer vehicle to the world.
They hummered it, huh?
Absolutely. We're next going to talk about another hero of ours, one that has a lot of thanks to give to the Land Cruiser. I mean, these
A
things
souped-up Jeep.
A Land
not
Rover.
necessarily souped up, just a different
A
application.
Land Jaeger.
A Land
It's
Jaeger.
just a big sausage.
That's a big sausage.
Oh, I love me a Land Jaeger. And I also love me a Toyota Helix.
Hell yeah.
Yeah,
That one's seen better days, I believe.
it has. And
Unassuming.
we're going to talk about this specific
Why does this look like
Toyota
something
Hilux.
from Cars?
In a moment, let me introduce the general concept. So the Toyota Hilux is one of the most rugged, ubiquitous vehicle platforms on the planet. Known simply It was sold as the Toyota Hilux worldwide, except for, weirdly enough, in North America, starting in the 1960s. And for almost 30 years, they just didn't give it a name in America. We now know them as the Toyota Tacoma. But if you look at a 1990s Toyota pickup truck, like 1990,
no Tacoma.
On your registration, it just says Toyota model pickup. They didn't even give it a fucking name.
Let's
it was
go.
just that much of the workhorse for Toyota.
Horse with no name, you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
I wonder why North America was so Hilux or Hilux.
It's pronounced either
Hilux?
way, kind of depending on which market it was in. Some people say Hilux, others say Hilux.
I wonder if there was like a rights issue or something, because that's a very American thing to do. Like, no, you can't name it the Hilux because LeBron James already.
I think it was honestly
copyrighted it.
Yeah.
Toyota didn't have a bunch of faith in it and in the North American market. We were already the land of trucks.
Yeah.
We already had the Ford F-150, the Chevy Silverado, the Dodge.
Toyota already did that with like sedans, though. You kind of had your big 80s, 90s, they were in the scene. It wasn't like they were unheard of.
Toyota's success wasn't in America initially, wasn't in off-road vehicles or trucks. Okay. It was in their small, fuel-efficient compact cars. That's where they initially made their nut here in this market.
They probably got a brand test, and they're like, "Oh, Toyota's going to be weak in trucks." So.
And it took me a long time to research
this.
They said
bet.
Yeah.
The reason Toyota named it the Tacoma, which for I guess the listeners who may not live in Western Washington, Tacoma is the Salish word for Mount Rainier.
Yeah,
that is their name for it. Of all the Salish coastal peoples. And Toyota was looking for, when they were finally sort of giving the truck a facelift and finally giving it a name in the North American market, wanted something that evoked the powerful aspect of nature. And
mountains are
it on Mount Rainier.
Well, mountains are popular names.
Yeah.
Denali.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You mean McKinley?
I mean, no, officer. I don't mean McKinley.
But yeah, so it finally got its name in 1995. And these little monsters are the pinnacle of reliability, whether they have the R series gasoline engine or the L series diesel engine, which unfortunately we did not get in America. The Canadians did, we didn't.
I assume a spoiler alert, most of the world got the diesel edition.
Except for us. But that's one of the few times where we're not missing out too much. The 22R series engine truly is a bulletproof fucking motor. And I say that with people have shot it with guns and it will still function. It is known to be just simply indomitable. It is the result of Judoka, Kaizen, and the 5 Whys for, at this point, multiple decades on a 4-cylinder engine that Toyota produces. And so basically indestructible, eternally reliable, and like I had said a little bit earlier, anybody with half of a brain and a socket wrench with a 10mm socket can pretty much rebuild this thing from the ground up in their backyard. So just the ubiquity and usefulness of a vehicle like this cannot go understated. This specific model, the one that we see here in picture, as you can see kind of from the card that's on there, you can see the Top Gear logo. This is known as the Top Gear Hilux, as they call it over in the UK. So as part of basically just a series of what can we do to a vehicle, the boys of Top Gear went and bought a 1983 Toyota Hilux from the West Country of England. They found a farmer who had already put 176,000 miles on that Hilux. It was rusting already.
Okay.
And the interior was torn to shreds by a farm dog riding in it for all of those 176,000 miles.
Okay.
It had been rode hard and put up wet for well over a decade at this point, and just at this point ran like a top.
Runs great, kind of looks like shit, but not like this.
It did not look that shitty. Top Gear then proceeded to put it through a series of challenges of like how much abuse can one of these little fuckers take, and
That's a fun challenge.
until you kill it. That was their ultimate goal, was to get to the point where they did shit to it, and then without spare parts, you could not get it to turn over and drive. So, the amount of things that they did to it. So it had 176,000 miles on it. The truck was crashed more times than you can possibly count. They did multiple segments driving it through various cities in England, and they just would take out a wall if they thought they could, or like a stone out of a stone wall. They would drive it downstairs. They would crash it into like bike racks.
Like, stop! He's already dead.
Just continuously, like,
Give it hell, huh?
He's 87 in truck years. Don't do this.
they crashed it through a barn at one point. Like,
Hell
it took
yeah.
out a whole fucking barn. They raised and dropped it by a crane multiple times. They raised it like 20 feet in the air and just dropped it.
It's funny.
They then picked up a trailer and dropped the trailer on it several times.
Okay.
Every single time it would drive with the trailer sort of counter-levered over it still. Would not give up. Then shit got real crazy. They hit it with a wrecking ball from pretty much every different angle. That's where a lot of these dents are coming from. They beat the living shit out of it with a wrecking ball, including like rolling it over, and they would roll it back up onto its wheels.
And
a little bit of time and a little bit of wrenching just to like reconnect parts that have disconnected from each other. Fires right up.
Taylor, I'm pretty sure you found Robot Jesus. Like, I'm pretty sure you found...
This is all-wheel drive Jesus. And he hasn't even yet to be tested. Another thing that the Top Gear crew did, they submerged it in the ocean. They took it out to Brighton or Bristol in the southeastern part of England and like tied it off at the end of a boat launch, knowing that like high tide was coming in and it was going to go like several hundred feet past where they had tied off this hillocks. And over the course of a night with high tide rolling in and then going out, the ropes broke. So it got dragged even further out to sea. Once low tide had come in, it was literally caked in sand. You couldn't see any of the vehicle and was like upside down. They flipped it back over. They turned the crankshaft to eject all of the water that had then filled the engine cylinders at that point, sprayed a little starter fluid in it. Once again, no spare parts. They reconnected the battery, and after about 20 minutes, it cranked over, started, and they drove it away.
Go car, go.
After it had survived being drowned, they set it on fire. They threw a flaming torch into the interior and let it burn for burn itself out over the course of 2 hours.
It's like the Rasputin of cars.
Still fired up and ran. Their ultimate test of it is they placed this hillocks on top of a skyscraper or multi-story apartment complex that was about to be imploded. So they placed it on top of a building that the whole city block set to be imploded as part of a development. And then they imploded the building that it was sitting under. So it rode a building 30 plus stories down to the ground. They dug it out of the rubble. They turned some wrenches, reconnected a loose battery cable, and it fired back up, and it drove back to the Top Gear
What a
studios.
champion.
Go car, go.
What an absolute beast.
It just proved that like the amount of over-engineering and the amount of input that is given from the people who make the product, who it also just continue to buy in the investment. When your employer listens to your suggestions, it encourages you to continue to innovate the product you're working on because you have skin in the game. You can be the guy that said like, yeah, you know how this does that instead of it this? I was the guy who suggested that.
Yeah.
Even though I'm just Steve, the guy who works at the Toyota plant in fucking Georgetown, Kentucky.
Also, it's worth noting, I mean, it's just an unassuming truck.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's not like yeah, I'm on the production line and I push the big red button today to say how like, hey, we can throw a couple more horses under the supercar's hood.
Yeah.
It's an unassuming truck, and they made the perfect truck.
And
Like Da Vinci's fucking
Absolutely.
perfect circle, perfect truck.
Go to any grocery store parking lot in any part of America, and I guarantee you there will be a Toyota pickup of some sort, whether it be the Tacoma, the pre-named Toyota pickup, or even the SUV equivalent, which is built on the exact same chassis with the exact same running gears,
Yeah.
the Toyota 4Runner.
I mean, why build cars after this? You've already reached perfection.
They just keep innovating. But yes, so the Top Gear Hilux, despite all of the punishment they'd given it, you think that it had gone home to four-wheel drive Jesus, but that little L series engine would crank over again, and it spat in the face of God defiantly and continued trucking on down the road. So now that we've met the heroes, some of the heroes of our story, let's meet our, in quotations, villain.
Okay.
Heavy quotes.
This is Muammar Gaddafi.
Let's go.
Great style.
Muammar.
Great style. Great hair.
Granted,
Great sunglass choice.
I
Great-
found the
great
most
photo.
schlubby picture of Muammar Gaddafi as I
Man,
possibly
Adam-
can, which, by the way, is the top result on Google Images from Muammar Gaddafi.
He looks like Adam Driver's looking rough these days, but he's not looking this rough.
He does look like he's hiding being in handcuffs.
No, this is the face you give when like, yeah, I just shat in the front lawn.
When imperialist
like, I'm
pigs-
sorry, thanks for letting me in.
I mean, he did do that in the UN. That dude set up camp with his all-female bodyguard brigade. He set up a massive yurt in the middle of Central Park, and that's how he decided to attend the UN meetings that he had been summoned to.
Terrible,
sweaty.
terrible human.
Like
but
I say, quote-unquote villain. Muammar Mohammed Abu Minyar al-Gaddafi is a complicated man. Like
Sure
any
is.
historical
He has
figure.
layers.
look at those eyes.
He did some interesting things.
Some would say.
Look at that photo. That's a very big button on his pin.
And granted, like, we understand Muammar Gaddafi from a Western perspective.
Yeah.
He constantly spat in the face of Western imperialism. So, of course, as Americans, we don't have the most flattering picture of him in
Totally.
our schools and in our media. He also did some really great things, like gender equality under his rule in Libya exploded. He was very focused on educating the Libyan people. He, like, the main part of the coup d'etat that he was the leader of in 1969 to oust their king, King Idris, who was a CIA or Western asset, was, hey, man, you've just discovered oil here. I don't want my country to be pillaged of its most valuable resource and my people to see none of the gain of that. So I'm going to perform a coup d'etat, and we're nationalizing the oil industry. So if you want Libyan oil, you got to pay us for it. You can't just come in, set up shop, have your contractors in, come and extract the shit from us, and then fuck off with all the profits while we get nothing.
That's what Quantum of Solace was about, but it was water instead.
Yeah,
The
so
Bolivian water.
but this isn't a deep
Classic Hollywood.
Classic Hollywood.
this isn't a deep dive into Muammar Gaddafi. I'm not well versed enough on
Who's
the
going to do that
subject.
episode?
Maybe me.
Dibs,
This honestly
dibs,
pretty
dibs.
interesting. It did inspire a potential non-Toyota episode out of me. But I would argue that he was a hero in many ways for the Libyan people. He is just the villain of this story.
Okay.
And so let's explore that.
Let's do that.
So we have our heroes. We have our villain. Let's explore the battlefield.
We have our Chad.
And
We have
some
our Chad.
other villains. Yes, this is the country of Chad. As you can see, it shares a border with the country of Libya.
And it has one weird red line going all the way through it.
Yeah,
does.
that's a very confusing red
Wouldn't
line.
you know it, boys? But the very small name of the town that very big arrow is pointing to is Auzau. It is, and the line that is drawn next to it, it denotes a region of Chad known as the Auzau Strip. This is generally, as you can see by the lack of cities on the map of Chad in this region, a very harsh, inhospitable desert environment.
Looks like a rough.
The only reason you have Auzau and that couple other city towns marked there are because those are oases. There is actually a natural source of water in those areas, so things can grow and thus people can live there. The rest of it, inhospitable southern Sahara desert.
Secluded is the right word as well.
Incredibly, and also very bereft of natural resources, except for the fact that the Auzau Strip is a place where one could potentially find uranium.
Uraniums.
And uranium can be refined into plutonium. And potentially...
What do the Libyans want, Zach?
That plutonium...
The plutonium!
Could be sold to a bit of a crackpot here in the U.S. Named Doc Brown. I did
But he sold them pinball parts.
You fucking did it.
Yeah,
I made technicals match up with Back to the Future.
You did it. You stole my heart.
Thank you.
Do the Ecto 1 next.
So, in the country of Chad, it gained its independence from its colonial master in France in 1960.
Do they have blue in their flag? Do they have red, white, and blue in their flag?
They did.
Yeah, they did.
It just wasn't the Russian or the American red, white, and blue, nor the British.
Netherlands have red, white, and blue.
Yeah.
Nor the Belgium?
The Belgians have red, white, and blue. I don't think the Netherlands do.
Nor the Puerto Ricans.
Nor the Puerto Ricans.
Nor the Greece when the flag is a little bit bloody.
Or the Japanese flag when you throw blueberries at it.
Yeah.
Anyway, in 1960, Chad gains its political independence, somewhat, from France. And their initial president is elected, Francois Tombol Baye, who we can see here.
He seems like a nice man. He looks like he reads a newspaper very
I like
aggressively.
images of dudes that show that they're reading a newspaper or a magazine.
He looks outraged.
He's a little bit of an aggro dude. Even though he was all about overthrowing imperialist rule and, had rebelled in favor of democracy for the people, once, independence came to Chad.
Did power get to his head?
It did.
Whoa!
Yeah.
No way!
Yeah.
That's like the first time ever.
Yeah, almost immediately upon taking power, Francois Tombol Baye outlawed any other political party other than the let me take a quick look here. The Chadian Progressive Party, the PPT, as it is abbreviated.
I have a great idea.
So now
you elect me, and then nobody else gets to be
it's
elected.
like if what?
I got a great idea.
Perfect.
I got a great idea.
It's like if Brandon won in 2020 and said, now there's only Democrats. Republicans don't exist anymore.
Yeah, I'm gonna get there ain't gonna be no Republicans.
As you can imagine, in a time in Africa that I don't know enough about, I am fully willing to admit that to you, dear listener.
Oh God, if you're getting your information from us,
please don't. I know enough as it pertains to this particular story that I'm trying to tell. There are subtleties, there are nuances, and there are full-blown just big events that I am unaware of as
Blatantly,
a stupid Westerner.
We all reserve that there's so much information, only so much information we can take in on this.
And I'm willing to admit I am ignorant about African history.
This war wasn't fully just fought because the Hilux existed. There's many contributing factors.
And a big part of that factor is the Auzau Strip. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Let's talk about this a little bit.
So
let's get into it.
In 1960 is when Chad gains its independence. Francois Tombol Baye is elected the president. Now, fast forward to 9 years later in 1969, King Idris of Libya is ousted in the coup d'etat led by Muammar Gaddafi, and now they are both the political leaders of their
the new
respective
kid on the
countries.
playground. He's got something to prove.
Oh, sure.
Yes.
You got to go out and you got to punch the biggest guy next to you.
Absolutely.
And the thing about it is the political climate of Chad, once Muammar Gaddafi assumed power in Libya, is things weren't great in Chad.
No.
They were less than a decade into
Their independence?
Their being an independent
Which always
country.
comes with civil unrest.
It did, and Francois Tambobaye is from the southern region, which is very Western influenced, very Christian.
He's
themed.
named Francois.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
you know,
He's named after the people that was
it's
just
sort
there.
of like, hey, no, we're totally independent. My name's Francois. It has the country that
Yeah.
Hi, Hi, my name is Great Britain Johnson, and I'm the first president of the United States.
Hello, my name is Queen.
Yeah. And so you have the southern half of the country where he is from, very Western influenced and somewhat Christian. You also have the northern region of the country, which is pan-Arab and very Muslim. And so they more sort of ideologically lean towards a guy like Muammar Gaddafi than they do a guy like Francois Tambobaye.
Yeah, it's a terrible border is the deal.
So
Who's our Hissene? Hissine?
This is Hissine Habra. We'll discuss him a little bit later
Looks
because
like he's American.
He's making a cameo.
he's gonna make a full blown. He's the understudy who's about to take over the leading
That's a
role.
very ominous American flag in that picture, too.
It is. He visited the United Nations too. Everyone gets a turn.
I want a
in
hat
New
like
York.
that, though. I know
So-
it's probably a very.
I want to
like,
put my
sacred
own
hat.
red pin in that.
So, almost upon immediately taking control of Libya in 1969, Gaddafi began backing the rebel forces, the people who were not stoked on Francois, and the PPP or the PPT in northern Chad.
CPP.
Inevitably, so for a few years up until 1972, Libya, along with the Soviet weapons and resources there being given by the
Yeah.
Soviet
No, they got touched by the
USSR.
Soviets.
Yeah.
Well, they were giving a big middle finger to the West. And
That's
so
right,
The
yeah.
Soviets wanted to continue
Yeah.
to back them. That's why.
Taylor, you've...
It's like there's only three
His-
big corporations in the world. It's the Soviets, it's the
you
United
know.
States, and it's whatever's in Europe right now.
We're playing
Yes.
musical chairs with only 3 chairs at any time. That's all the human brain can keep track of.
And so Gaddafi,
that's good.
despite not liking imperial influence in his homeland of Libya, kind of put his finger on the scale of the political conflict of his southerly neighbor by providing weapons and resources and training and sometimes, full-blown just troops and airstrikes. All sorts of things. And that goes on till about 1972, where Francois and Gaddafi meet and broker a bit of an arrangement amongst themselves. And what Gaddafi likes to claim is that at that point he agreed to pay Francois 40 million pounds, which roughly translates to
Oh, this is
about
1960s pounds.
Yeah.
40 million Great British pounds in 1972, which roughly translates to about 649 million US dollars in today's money, for all of the Auzau Strip.
The whole plate.
He claims that
He's-
he gave the money to Francois, and Francois said, "Thank you, bud." And all of that is Libya. He also claims that Libya had a right to that land because it was originally part of a unrectified treaty between France and Italy pre-World War II.
It's so crazy that it's like right at like a very valuable line too.
Where
it's
you
like
could get
it's
this
like a
thing
very
you could-
valuable
Well, you
thing
know-
is right there, and now someone's like, there's uranium here, and we're just gonna mine it. You're still cool with that border?
And so almost and despite having these claims that there was an exchange and an agreement, and claiming that they had some sort of documents proving that there was an exchange of funds for land betwixt Libya, Libya and Chad.
What's some documents between friends?
What would actually happen, though, Taylor?
Well, in 1993, in an international court of justice, sort of to resolve the conflict that took place between the two countries beginning in the 1970s. Muammar Gaddafi was unable to provide any proof that there was such a transaction between himself.
Here I had full faith in my boy Francois, and I was like, you know what? He said, yeah, I'll sell it to you, and then turned his back and immediately went, no, I didn't. As he's walking out with money.
Is it possible? Is it possible? Yes. If so, Muammar should have done a better job keeping his receipts.
For us as the listener, was this after it was discovered that there was mining there?
Of course. After
we understood what uranium was and how to refine
and the Soviets want uranium, and they're dealing with
the Libyans.
Well, yes, of course the Libyans did.
What else are they going to sell at malls late at night?
Libya sounds to be under like a Soviet sphere of influence.
Soviet influence.
In
they're part of the Justice League. You know?
That's the most hands way off to describe it.
Libya's relationship with the Soviets is tumultuous at best. The sort of core philosophy of pan-Arabism, which then later evolved into more of pan-Africanism rather than pan-Arabism, doesn't necessarily include a massive empire thousands of miles away. So it's great to take their jets and their tanks and their guns and their money when you need it.
But do we really have to go to bed at 10 o'clock?
They'll show up to Russ's house like on Halloween and be like, yeah, we're still going to knock the door like a couple times and get some candy.
It's up and down. Once again, I'm not well enough educated on it to be any sort of authority upon the matter.
No, I'm just curious. I don't mean to sidetrack.
No, I appreciate the question, and I did somewhat prepare for it as best I could. And so we get to 1975. These two countries aren't officially at war yet, but Libya is fucking around, playing a little bit of Kingmaker, a little bit of Imperial, playing
Imperiola.
Are they moving weapons into the Strip?
Well, no, they already have. Yeah, no, they've armed the rebel groups who are favorable to.
There's already drive-in movie theaters popping up at Wednesdays.
No, there's just Soviet tanks and guns and occasional air support from the Libyans and MiGs. Yeah. In 1975, our boy Francois deposed by his own people. It turns out when you only give them the choice of one political party and you don't really care what happens to like half the population who you don't necessarily culturally like very much, inevitably they want to kill you.
No kidding.
And they did.
They'll find a way.
I feel like other modern countries should do shit like that. But anyway, what was his run like when he was the founder of
15 years.
15 years, right? Like 1960, when they became a country, he led them into that.
He essentially was a president for life, though, in a way.
They have a habit of doing that.
As in his life ended in 1960. Yeah, okay.
And he was deposed by, at that time, the rebel general, Felix.
But that is too long to be in a position of power,
15 years? Oh, yeah. Felix Maloum was who replaced Francois Tombalbaye. He is Mr. Not Pictured in this slide because he doesn't fucking matter. Because only a few years after that, he is replaced by Hissène Habré. Another guy.
He didn't live long enough to see a photo.
He lived long enough to inevitably, in 2017, be sentenced to death by the Chadian government for the war crimes he committed during his reign of power from 1982 to 1990.
That's something.
So there are no good guys in this story, other than...
We're talking politics. I already know there's no good guys.
Other than perhaps the indigenous people of northern Chad. And Hissène Habré basically, was also not in favor of the Libyan occupation. A lot of people who deposed Francois hated his buddy-buddy relationship with Libya. Yeah. And so they basically had said, like, hey, get out. And then Libya did kind of, but then they went back into the Auzau region and set up some bases and some airstrips and, continued to arm rebels. And
Everybody else is doing it.
Yeah,
Everybody else is making
everyone
airfields.
else is going over to some place and fucking around with
Hey,
tanks
I know
and
a guy
shit.
you can talk to. You can get some sweet Soviet jets and sweet old American jets for super
Fucking
cheap.
Nice. My real question is, how are we getting Toyotas into Libya?
we're about to get
It
there.
sounds like a hot commodity. How many Toyotas can we get into the strip of
How
land?
many Toyotas is that man's life worth?
In 1983, 5 years before I was born, we kick off the Chadian-Libyan War. It began when
They
Gaddafi,
knew the prophet would be born. They had to start pillaging
When
it.
was this? 95?
1983.
1983.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it began when Gaddafi refused to acknowledge Habre's legitimacy as the president.
That's a sick move, though.
The conflict consisted.
He's a loser. He's not a president.
Yeah, Muammar Gaddafi kind of was the OG Trump.
Yeah.
And he was in president for like
40 years, right?
A little over 50, almost 50.
Right. They did him in pretty.
I mean, he stepped down from government several times. It would always be like 5 to 6 months later. He'd be like, fuck it, I'm back in charge.
stay away.
I apologize for Jim. It was really bad.
I was just taking a vacation.
So our two sides consist of Libyan forces and Libyan-backed rebel groups of northern Chad. The Libyan-backed forces are armed with Soviet vehicles and weapons that Libya had in supply from their tepid relationships with the Soviets. The Chadian forces were armed by the West, predominantly France, but also the U.S. loves to get in and fuck over someone who's being backed by the Soviets. The U.S.
At this time,
loves
yes.
a proxy war. We
yeah.
fucking love a proxy war.
Because even the smallest little bit, we can make into the biggest deal on the planet.
But and our
The small,
It's that
yeah.
fucking
Halliburton stock prices go up so much, and we love that.
Well, it's that I'm not touching you.
Yeah.
I'm only supplying weapons.
You just gotta show
supplies and
show
training
up,
to you. I'm
show
not
the
touching
flag.
you, though.
I mean, yes, this is 50 years of history between the 1940s and the 1990s between Russia and America.
The fucking
Is
pissing
I'm
match.
I'm not touching you. I'm just giving them guns and bombs and planes and tanks. And so
Is it so wrong? Is it so wrong for us to supply arms? That's crazy. That's
and the
one.
UN is the dad that never says, like, turns around and says, like, no, I'm turning this car around.
UN's the dad that just wants to play with their model train set and be left alone.
I got the kids for the weekend. This sucks.
And so in 1983,
That's a good
the
one.
war begins, and it goes pretty like it's mostly a stalemate or goes poorly for Chad. They basically, from 1983, lose Chad from this line here in Auzau pretty much to this line here. They
Damn.
pretty much
Oh,
lose
there's a
all
full-on
of
invasion.
northern Chad.
Because you don't know. There could be good uranium out there, too.
Totally.
Could be good uranium
Keep
out there
digging.
too, and there are American buyers to put it in a DeLorean.
And look at that. There's 2 towns in what looks to be, is that 150 kilometers for the map scale or 100? Like,
It's many kilometers. This is a wide
you're looking
range.
at,
It's a full
like
deal.
a 400 to 500 mile stretch where there are 2 towns of note, and I assume each of those are like Nevada towns where
Yeah.
it's like
There's just a
30
Phillips 66.
There's maybe 80 people tops.
Pretty much. I mean, granted, there's a little bit more because these are such hospitable areas in a very inhospitable region. You may have a few thousand that live there in these scattered towns, and these towns aren't necessarily all of the small villages that
Sure.
may have
No, no,
oasis.
no.
There are towns small enough to not make a map. But yeah, so for 4 years, the conflict goes very poorly for Chad. They lose a bunch of territory to Libya and the Libyan-backed rebels, and pretty much lose the northern part of the country until 1987, when our heroes enter the fight.
Da, 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 da.
Are we talking the Mahajin? Is this? Are we? Going,
These are not the Mujahideen.
Yeah,
That
we
would
are
be
going full
Afghanistan.
Metal Gear Solid right now.
I mean, in its own way, yes. Finally, we get to the meat of the story. In 1987, Habre's forces made a lot of stop-and-go progress, evicting Libyan forces from northern Chad. It was mostly a lot of skirmishes. They had lost a lot of ground in 1987. They begin to start making up some ground as well. And over time, the people of northern Chad who had initially sided with the Libyans realized that the grass necessarily wasn't greener on the Libyan side of the fence, and so they've mostly abandoned the cause. So at this point in time, and there's been a shitload of bloodshed for almost 2 decades at this point within Chad.
But also you have like the foreign invader thing.
Yeah, people.
No matter anywhere in the world, like my home that I've held, and this government sucks, but this is the government that I've had for the past X amount of years.
Yeah.
You know, regionally sort of a deal. And now the Libyans are coming in. Fuck those guys.
Fuck those guys.
Me and 15 of my boys down at the pub are going to get on the back of a Toyota and just rain hell.
Hell yeah. What we're seeing right in front of us here, this is a Toyota J70 Land Cruiser.
So you just want to listen to Rage Against the fucking Machine.
Mm-hmm.
Get 'em.
And this is in my notes. A little bit later, I picture just Fortunate Son blasting out of the 2 speakers, one in each door, and they sound like shit. But some folks are born made to wave the flag. But anyway, so now pretty much in northern Chad and the Auzau strip, it's mostly just conscripted Libyan soldiers who are in small pockets, very low morale. Shit's been grinding on for several years. There doesn't seem to be a lot of traction one way or another, and so it's not going great. The Chadian army did not have access to the advanced war vehicles like the Libyans, Soviet tanks, jets, things of that nature. But it did get a little air support from France. France did send Rafales occasionally to attack and...
those are sexy fighters, by the way.
Yes. I think that's what they had in the 80s as well. But so they would send in some air support so that the Libyan Air Force couldn't necessarily always have air superiority on the battlegrounds. France,
you keep them guessing. I'm not touching you. I'm France. I'm not touching you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A radar silo blew up, but I'm not touching you. I'm just flying jets in a different nation.
And there was another thing that France was willing to provide. About 400 Toyota Hilux and J70 Land Cruiser trucks.
What, were they in a warehouse or something?
I think they just bought them. I think they're mostly new for the time. Because I mean,
Daddy France bought
this. Is, to my understanding, a picture of Chadian forces that may be up-resed, but it is from that time period.
Yeah.
And we have our Toyota. This is a J70 Land Cruiser. They sold a what's called Ute version. Otherwise in the world, Australia is very popular for the term ute, which basically means car truck. But it can also be like, hey, this is normally an SUV, but instead of putting the roof on it, we didn't put the roof on it, and we just gave it a bed. So this is all intents and purposes the same as a Toyota Land Cruiser that you would buy in the 80s here in America, but they made a truck version out of it to sell in the African market. And so they got them from their French benefactors. The Toyotas were quickly made into technicals. They were mounted with anti-tank, anti-aircraft, and machine guns.
Presents from the French.
Anti-infantry.
Presents from the French, maybe presents from the Americans
Look at this. You throw 18 people on the back of a fucking Hilux.
That is a technical in and of itself.
That is a technical of
okay.
That is 18 different brains, 18 different guns.
And let's stop and think about and go back a little bit on what we know about Toyota trucks and the Toyota production and manufacturing philosophy.
They're going to send a dude out there to fix that car.
Which has been active for 50 years.
If it ever breaks out of the desert.
I don't...
And ask what happened.
Just the nicest Japanese salary man comes up in, like, the cleanest Toyota uniform.
What happened
Excuse
here?
me.
I can neither confirm nor deny Hirohito Suzuki-san arrival in Chad to inspect the rebel forces' vehicles. But I do know that because at this point we have near 50 years of Judoka, Kaizen, the 5 Ys, Toyota just makes vehicles that won't fucking die and are over-engineered to do more than what they're initially marketed for. And this is a great benefit once you're fighting war in sort of the 21st century within the 20th century. Libya is fighting war in a 20th century methodology. They're using tanks. They're using jets. Chadians have to get a little creative. They got to do a little freestyle jazz. And these trucks are perfect for that. The small size and lightness of the trucks in comparison to a full fucking blown tank made them vastly more nimble than those tanks. And so instead of, being more armored and being able to take more hits, which tanks aren't that great at anyway. You shoot one of them with a fucking other tank round, they're kind of dead.
Tank, it's whoever shoots first.
Yeah. Exactly.
You put tank up against technical. Things get a little bit dicey.
Yeah.
If the technical can get close and do damage, your armor is worthless.
Yeah, but you can.
But you have a big fucking gun on the tank.
You do.
And if you can hit a nimble thing like a fucking Jeep or technical, you're good.
Yeah.
The thing
you gotta
about
be
that
a good.
It's
you gotta
a boxing match
tanks,
at that point.
and all Imperial forces in Northern Africa and the Middle East will learn this lesson. Tanks don't turn their guns fast enough to keep up with civilian vehicles.
Even machine guns.
And so you can outstrafe a tank just by driving in circles around it, and not all of these trucks are filled with 18 dudes with M4s and AKs. Some of them have anti-tank weaponry mounted in the back of it.
Oh, yeah.
Which is
Some
perfect
of
for
them got
shooting
jars
tanks.
of tar that can burn a fucking tank. Some of them got
Most of them just had either
improvised
anti-tanks or RPGs, maybe some
some
Stinger
rocket
missiles,
propelled grenades, some
Yeah.
grenade type situation.
some armor-piercing, maybe uranium-enriched rounds that can puncture heavy armor that you get from the West. And these little trucks would just simply outstrafe the tanks, pepper them with various anti-tank fire until tank is now on fire and is a flaming sarcophagus for Libyan forces or in the tank. The same qualities that made these technicals incredibly difficult for tanks to fight also made them really hard to hit from the air.
Because they're nimble.
They're very
quick.
small,
They're slick
and they
as fuck.
can move laterally pretty fucking quick.
And I assure you, a Toyota Hilux is not producing the amount of heat that a fucking tank does out of its exhaust.
No, it's
so
much harder to see.
you're even in infrared, a lot harder to see.
Even if they had those capabilities, which arguably they might not have at that point in time, it's just harder. And like the only way to potentially hit a technical is to get closer to the ground to it, and that puts you within range of anti-aircraft guns that may be mounted on the back of
This
these
is so
things.
perfect.
Yeah, it is the proletariat's war machine.
It covers.
Are you trying to indoctrinate us with some far left liberals rise up, people versus the
Hey,
machine?
everybody!
Not much
turn
help
a
for the
truck
liberals.
into a
Let's
gun.
Leftists rise up. But yeah, so and also one of the things that I read, and I Googled this for like an hour after I finished this presentation because I still couldn't necessarily believe the claim, but supposedly yes, it did happen. Libya was expecting, like, with Western backing of France and the U.S., that the Chadian forces would be provided with tanks as well.
Totally.
Okay.
So they oftentimes fortified their airstrips, their military installations with anti-tank mines. There would be minefields that basically in 360 degrees surrounded these installations.
Hilux don't set off the mines.
These are very light and very quick moving. These anti-tank mines are meant for heavy, slow moving vehicles.
That's what they're trained for.
And like I said, it seems somewhat unbelievable at first, but inevitably, let me find the name of the ultimate commander of...
Now, mind you, a good anti-vehicle mine typically goes off in about a second.
Yeah.
Oh,
You have a
milliseconds. It's no longer...
Sometimes
yeah.
milliseconds, but some of them have a delay. Especially
Very,
a
small.
very small delay, but a delay in this area. Your heavier anti-tank mines, especially on ground that you're going to go through, have like a delay of like 2 or 3 seconds. Because you're not going to drive a tank over the anti-tank mines you had, but you may have to take a tractor over it or something else. And just in case, there's that little bit of delay. But
Well, a tractor ain't going to move fast enough
No.
to not stop you from getting blowed up.
no, but a Hilux, you're flying over that shit.
Yeah, you cruising.
And it didn't always work 100%
No,
of the time with
of
these
course not.
these technicals as well. But it is somewhat documented that the Chadian commander Hassan Jamas is my best guess at the pronunciation of his name. Personally, hauled ass going over 100 kilometers an hour, which is roughly 62 miles. These things can get up to about
On this
like 80,
pictured
90.
ground, if you're
Yeah.
going 62 miles per hour, that fucking sucks.
You're
screwed.
fucking lying, bro. And they found out if you could kind of fucking pin that shit to the red line and hit top speed and drove over those mines, you stood a decent chance of not getting blowed up. Now, did all of them not get blowed up? No. Some of them got
course.
blowed
That's
up.
how mines
That's
work.
how you are reminded that you are going over a minefield.
But
Yeah.
imagine just sitting there thinking, oh, we're going to be attacked by tanks. We're so clever. We've planted all of these mines that will blow them up before they're even close to us. And then all of a sudden, out of the nowhere, some folks aboard made to wave the flag. And there's just a Yoder that's fucking screaming in from the desert, armed with 18 dudes, fucking fully loaded to the teeth.
Me and my boys are coming for you.
Oh shit, where's my gun? Where did I put my gun? I didn't expect guys with guns to be here.
It's the prequel era plumber boys. Just listen to Heart's Barracuda, just flying over mines.
Absolutely.
Ooh, Barracuda.
And so, like, in 1987, the tides of the war began to change in a few short months. Like, this campaign with the technicals began in, like, January of 1987.
Yeah.
By August of 1987, the Chadians had taken back most of northern Chad, except for the Auzau Strip. At that point in time, the French didn't necessarily want to go up against Gaddafi's claim. They didn't necessarily were so sure of legitimacy because they were part of that unrectified agreement with the Italians in 1935 about who owned that land. So at that point, the French decided to withdraw their air support. They told the Chadian forces, we're happy to help you all the way up to this point. If you want that last little bit, you're on your own.
Okay. I'm sure it worked out great for everybody. Thanks, Daddy France.
So now the Chads are on their own. Just some ragtag bros and their Yodas. But in spite of the lack of support, the Chadian forces, led by Commander Jamas, were able to reclaim the Auzau Strip for a time. They rolled right in, took that shit over, and it was all good until the Libyans decided, no, we still really want that. And then this method of war fighting was put to its test and proven to be ultimately not great for defense. This is a great offensive style of war.
Oh,
when
of
you
course.
can move fast
Absolutely.
and hit hard from any given direction at once, it's great. But when you have to stay still and be the defender of that, you take all of your advantages away.
Oh, absolutely.
So-
If you have an enemy shooting from some sort of vantage point or, some sort of artillery situation, like your Hilux
it's a bad
aren't
two-way
gonna
player.
Maybe your Hilux survives. And that's something to say about the Hilux.
It might.
But
The Hilux can survive a lot. It may not survive getting blown up with an artillery round.
no.
So Libya does regain access to the Auzau Strip in later August. And that's when the Chadians, led by Habre, decided to make a move, sort of an endgame move. And they decided to go onto Libya's turf. They go north the border into
We're taking
Libya.
our boys on spring
Yeah.
break.
On September
Break
5th,
of Libya. Let's go, boys.
on September 5th, 1987, just 1 year and 26 days before I was born.
I love this as
2000
the BC.
Yeah.
AD, BC.
Before
shit.
Taylor, BT, AT, or DT currently during Taylor.
Yeah.
That's the current period
BBT,
we're in.
before the birth of Taylor.
Yes. So 2,000 Chadian troops mounted up in their Yoders and drove under the cover of dark to the key and extremely fortified Libyan airbase in southern Libya of Matan al-Sara, where they'd be going up against 2,500 Libyan soldiers. So you're already outnumbered by 500 dudes.
Yeah.
And they're a real military. You're kind of more of guerrilla forces. They had a tank brigade of over 70 tanks. They had heavily armored military vehicles and artillery. They also had roughly 30 Russian MiGs and former other aircraft. Since the raid occurred, they had an idea. We're going to raid them at night, and we're going to approach from the north. So the Libyans are expecting an attacker to come up. If they're going to come up into Libya, it's going to be from the south. They drove the long way around, which
so they brought hard
with
past the defenses and circled
which
around.
to make a long circuitous trip through the desert, you need a vehicle that is reliable,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
that is fuel efficient,
Certainly.
that is capable of doing more than what is originally advertised or expected of it.
Undoubtedly.
And boys, they had Toyota trucks, so they were able to do that. So in the middle of the night on September 5th, they roll in from the north, and the Libyans thought, oh, shit, cool, backup's coming. We've got reinforcements on the way. We've been dealing with a lot of this shit sort of on the border conflict, getting a little sketchy. We were worried it might be coming onto the home turf. We got reinforcements on the way. And they basically realized too late, because under the cover of dark, the Chads rolled in, and it was too late to scramble the jets. It was too
Just
late.
Chads and Stacy's everywhere.
So the Chadian approaches were approaching from the north, and before they knew it, they were in the throes of battle. Chadian forces rapidly overtook tanks, aircraft, and artillery, and by the morning of September 6th, they had conquered and destroyed the Al Matan air base.
To be a fly on the wall on like Toyota's boardroom after this.
Yeah.
So we hear. Our trucks run really great. We all know this. Our trucks might win a war.
That'd be fucking epic.
And it's
We're going to
they
discuss
didn't-
that a little bit.
They didn't get into military vehicles after this, did they?
I mean, they make vehicles for the Japanese military, which
Okay.
basically is just kind of a ceremonial thing that Americans allow them to have.
Well, they have.
Right.
Yeah.
We wrote their constitution.
Their
We constantly
defense force
occupy
stopped
them.
being a defense force.
They're our most
like 3
valuable.
years ago.
They're our most valuable operating base in the East.
Yeah.
Like, it is what it is, unfortunately. And so, at the end of the battle, the Libyans had suffered over 1,700. 1,713 is the highest number reported casualties.
In the whole war?
Well, out of the 2,500 men that were stationed at that base, over 1,700 of them died. 300 of them were captured, and several hundred of them were reported as having fled into the desert.
Cowards.
They got trucks.
As
Run!
well, they lost their most strategic southern airfield, and they also lost a shitload of super valuable equipment like tanks and jets, like a bunch of shit that the Soviets may or may not, depending on how things are going with the Soviets, be willing to sell them. They lost in one night raid from a bunch of dudes in pickups. This story then leaked out to the rest of the world of this, like, basically 9-month series of battles. And so this era of the Chadian-Libyan War is been nicknamed the Toyota War. As, like, the time in which things turned for the Chadians was when they got their hands on 400 Toyota trucks that would not and could not die.
Sounds like a super fight scenario. Yeah. Who would win? The Libyan army on the southern border or 400 Toyota trucks?
Also, it's reported that night, despite all of the losses the Libyans suffered, the Chadian forces, of the 2,000 that were a part of that nighttime raid, they only suffered 65 casualties and lost a handful of Toyota trucks in the battle.
Of course.
So, boys, let's raise one.
Hey.
For those Toyota 4x4s that we lost in the process. And just like you said earlier, Ryan, this becomes more ubiquitous. This is basically the debut on the global stage for what the Toyota truck is capable of as a not intentionally military vehicle, but can become a military intentional vehicle. And every empire that has decided to fuck around in the MENA region of the Middle East and North Africa has felt the sting of a Toyota Technical. The Russians did in Afghanistan. The Americans have in Afghanistan and Iraq. almost to the point too, Americans have begun building technicals. You can occasionally see a Toyota Tacoma that was shipped back east because the Americans needed something that was light and quick and could have a gun mounted on it.
We need firepower
in
and
response
we
to
need a Tacoma
insurgencies.
truck.
Like, this is the beginning of like the 21st century of warfare.
And it's kind of scary. Halo called it.
Yeah, with a Warthog could just be 20 or the year 3000's version of a Toyota Tacoma for all we know.
Yeah.
It was, also made by Bungie, a company based out of Redmond, where there's, we love our Toyota trucks here in Washington State.
Yep.
But yeah, so this is how, the Russian Tachanka, the earliest modern era technical, relates to Back to the Future, and how using the principles of Judoka and Kaizen and that Toyota manufacturing process that they just wanted to use to make the vehicle that could carry the masses where they need to go, they may have ended up completely changing the face of warfare and evening the playing field between indigenous forces and the imperial occupiers that seek to subject them.
Fantastic.
Yay.
Wow.
You did it. Is this it?
This is it. This is it for this episode. I wanted to cover the Toyota War, a great story of a underdog who is equipped with nothing but just the most bare bones civilian class vehicle and overthrowing Libya is not a military superpower worldwide. Libya was a military superpower in the continent of Africa at the time.
And some dudes.
And some dudes.
With some freaking Toyotas.
Can I have the